All right, here we are in our final week of instruction. Congratulations on making it to this point in your, to this point in the semester. So, this is the final week where we're going to talk about courtroom testimony. You'll notice that I've posted an article from Police One about courtroom testimony that I really like. Just let me hit some of the high points and then I'll kind of add my own take on some of this through my years of experience and going to court and testifying and things like that. So, you hear this a lot in police work. Well, I sent a good case to the district attorney's office and, I don't know why, it didn't go to trial and I don't know why they dumped the case or why they let the guy plead. Well, newsflash, I'm going to tell you right now, it has more to do with the product than you send over to the district attorney's office than it actually does with whether or not they feel like trying the case. You'll hear a lot of people in law enforcement, make the statement about, for example, you'll hear this a lot. Well, I write such good cases, I never go to trial because all the reports that I write, I pretty much what they're saying is I got them dead to rights and they plead guilty. Just not true. I've seen cases where there's a person that's on video camera selling narcotics to an undercover agent and still won't plead guilty and still want to go to trial. So that, really has little to do with it. A lot of it has to do with what motivates that particular subject to go to court or to go ahead and take a plea. Doesn't really have a whole lot to do with how well you write your report. Now, the flip side of that is you may have someone who they got somewhere they need to be, for example, in jail or in prison, and because a person didn't do a good job with their preparation or their report, they end up taking a plea deal because it's going to be hard to prove the case. That's more common than you think. The other issue is, well, what happens when I get ready to go to court? I've seen officers who had really good cases, uh, you know, uh, wrote the reports really well, was very detailed, but when they get on the stand, for whatever reason, they're not able to convey that message. Here's something that you need to understand as well. Everything as far as evidence that comes into court comes through that witness stand, and that includes your report. So don't ever think, well, I wrote a good report, why do I need to come to court? The only way that report gets into evidence and into testimony is by you testifying about what you did, what you saw. I think we've already talked about report writing a little bit. Here's the deal, and I'll reiterate this. If it's not in your report, didn't happen. So, I'm not going to belabor that point, but let's talk a little bit about what happens when you actually go into the courtroom. If you show up for court to testify and you ask the prosecutor on your way to the courthouse and you say, do you have a copy of my report? You're already behind the eight ball. If you know you have a court date coming up, you need to go ahead and get that report, review it. Hopefully, the prosecutor will ask to meet with you and discuss the evidence that's going to come into the courtroom and why you did what you did and your documentation on that report. So you need to do your homework before you ever set foot in the courtroom. Here's the other thing that I tell people all the time when they're beginning a career in law enforcement. Uh, when you get out on your own after you're done with the FTO program and what have you, you need to go out and you need to make traffic stops and you need to write citations on those traffic stops, even though some of them may seem maybe not that big of a deal. You need to go ahead and write those tickets because you don't want, think of it this way. Do you want your first time testifying in court to be on a BS traffic ticket or do you want it to be on a capital murder case? Think about that. So, pretty much the procedures and what happens in a courtroom are the same. There are some variances with regard to how different judges, run things in their courtroom, but the overall foundation for what happens, it's set up by our founding fathers and the people who have um, proceeded to establish the criteria for what happens in the courtroom. So, it's pretty much the same. So you need to be comfortable with testifying. You need to understand a little bit about the courtroom procedures. And I tell people all the time, you need to go spend some time in the courtroom, even if you're off duty. Well, I'm not going to go do that during my off duty time. Well, then don't do it. But I'm telling you, when you have an occasion to go into the courtroom and watch what's going on, it'll prepare you a little bit better for what's going to happen. So there's an article that's in here that's written. The author's name is Valerie Van Brocklin, and she talks about some things that you need to do. You need to dress for success. Now, as a patrol officer, most times you'll wear your police uniform. I would suggest that you wear a long sleeve shirt with the clip-on tie. When you go to court, make sure that it's clean, and things of this nature. Now, I have been behind the curve, and there's been times when I was working midnights, had to go testify in court. I was in the uniform that I had worn. People understand that. And listen, here's the deal. If you have sleeve tattoos running up and down your forearms, jurors pick up on that kind of stuff. Some like it, some don't care. To be on the safe side, I just wear a long sleeve shirt. This has nothing to do with being discriminatory against someone who has that have tattoos on their arms. But at the same time, think about who's on your jury. You're going to have the little old ladies that are going to be deciding whether what you say is credible, that are in the gardening club or certain church groups or whatever. Those are the types of people that they try to put on juries. People that are going to be fair to both sides, obviously, but that are kind of down the middle as far as society. So you don't want to risk something like that. The deal is, you're not going to have typically your people that have multiple tattoos and things like that on your jury. Not that it doesn't happen, but that's just something that you need to be cognizant of. So make sure your shoes are shined, make sure that you're well groomed, and things like that. When you walk into the courtroom, you want to make sure that you know where you're going. If you walk into the courtroom and you're looking at the bailiff like, what do I do now? You should know and take the most direct route to get to the witness stand and get ready to testify. When you get ready to take the oath, look at the person who's giving you the oath, whether it's the judge or the court coordinator or whoever, or the bailiff. Make sure that you stand at attention, and you raise your right hand, and that you're listening to what they're saying. A lot of times officers go in, hey, will you raise your right hand? They're like, yeah, I do this all the time. Don't come off like that, because juries don't like it, and they really pick up on it. Prepare yourself for the first question. The prosecution is going to ask you your questions first. And so typically, unless for whatever reason you're called by the defense and not the prosecution, when you go into the courtroom, be ready for that first question. Typically the question is going to be, would you introduce yourself to the members of the jury? You can tell them your name. I'm Officer Smith with, Kilgore Police Department. And I've been with the department now for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case may be. And then the prosecutor is going to ask you to talk a little bit about your experience and training and things like that. Let's say, for example, you're a uniformed criminal investigator and you've taken fingerprints at a crime scene, and you're about to testify about those fingerprints. You need to testify when it comes to training. You need to talk about fingerprint training that you've been to. You need to talk about crime scene investigation training and things like that. Oftentimes we'll have officers that come in to talk about, say, for example, a property crime, and they're asked about their training, and they go into, firearms training. I've been to SWAT school. I've been to K-9 school. I went to an edged weapon defense course, which, all those things are great. But at the same time, you want to kind of focus what you mentioned as far as training onto what type of case, that is actually before the court. Listen carefully to the questions. Give the same kind of respect to the prosecutor as you do to the defense attorney. Do not pick a fight with a defense attorney. You will lose. I don't care what you've heard people say. Man, I had this defense attorney all confused, and you're being lied to. It's not true. Okay, so and the thing about it is there are certain procedures, and judges do not like police officers who go into the courtroom and crack wise with any of the attorneys. It's disrespectful. You're setting yourself up to look like the bad guy. You are going to be asked questions that are going to paint you into a corner, and it's going to be really uncomfortable. That's just the way it is. But the more prepared you are, the less sting there is when that does happen. I know from my personal experience early in my career, when I would write reports after a particular incident in the courtroom, I mentioned everything, because you don't want to be, I'm telling you, it is a sad, it's a really bad feeling when you're sitting up there on the witness stand and you're getting grilled by a defense attorney. It's not a good feeling at all. You just want it to be over with. So, fortunately for me, early in my career, I got the opportunity to testify in court pretty early on and quite often, so I was better prepared, and that helps a lot. Be sincere, be dignified when you give your answers. Don't use sarcasm and things like that. Just answer the question as it's asked to you. Okay. Remain calm. A lot of times the deal is you just want to take a deep breath. If you make sure you take a copy of your report with you. The defense attorney is going to have a copy of your report. Obviously, the prosecutor is going to have a copy of your report. There are some tactics sometimes that defense attorneys will use. They'll say, "Hey, can I see your offense report?" And you'll hand it to them, and they'll start looking at it, and they'll walk away with it, and they'll start asking you questions off of your offense report, which they already have a copy of. And that's to kind of separate you from your notes. So if they ask you a question and you're not sure, and the answer is probably in your offense report, just say, "Well, can I have my offense report back so I can answer your question?" And that's not a problem. So there are some tactics that are out there, but the more you testify, the more that you'll be aware of it, and it'll make you a lot more comfortable with what you're doing. So really, that's basically it as far as courtroom testimony. For the rest of this week, what I'd like for you to do is go back over your tests and the things and the modules that we've had thus far to prepare for next week. I will have another video to give some instructions on what to do. You can call Grace Kennedy here at the East Texas Police Academy and make arrangements with her for the final exam to be given here at the computer lab. And I really enjoyed having you guys and girls this semester. You've done a good job. I know that some of you are working and and some of you are also in the police academy while you're taking these courses. So I understand. I know what it's like when you're trying to work and go to school at the same time. So I get it, and I appreciate you staying with it, keeping in contact with me, so you can get your assignments done. And as I told you at the beginning of the semester, I told you I was going to work with you, and I think that we've worked pretty well together. Look, that's all I have for this week. So look over this article. There will be questions on your final from this particular article by Miss Van Brocklin. I hope that you have a successful week, and we'll be talking to you next week as we get ready to take the final.